Most leadership books don't mention it. PD sessions, they avoid it. But today's guest, he's not afraid to name it. If you're leading without asking what matters most, you're just managing noise. In this episode, we unpack the silent epidemic of misaligned leadership priorities. You'll hear what happens when a visionary principal pauses long enough to ask a disruptive question and refuses to lead on autopilot again. I'm Danny Bauer, and this is Better Leaders, Better Schools, the original ruckus cast for visionary leaders who want to do school different, even within a traditional system, so that you create a campus experience worth showing up for. Thanks to ruckus makers just like you, this show ranks in the top 1% of nearly 4 million worldwide podcasts. Today, my guest is Will Parker. He's my friend. He's also an author, a coach, and champion for school leaders who want to make meaning, not just manage tasks. You probably know him from his great work at Principal Matters, and you should check out his Principal Matters podcast. And he's here to discuss his latest book, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? So once again, thanks for listening, and we'll be right back after a quick message from our show sponsors. Still scrambling for supplies like it's 1999? ODP Business Solutions streamlines everything from pencils to projectors so you can focus on what matters, making an impact. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Community beats compliance every single time. The Ruckus Maker Club is your on-demand network of bold school leaders designing the future of education. Join today for $100 a month and get coaching, on-demand courses, AI prompts and custom GPTs, and all our automatic school frameworks and tools within our private digital community. There's no more PD that puts you to sleep. We have on-demand coaching and pop-ups throughout each month. It's real leadership fuel. You're going to love it. Go to club.ruckusmakers.news to join the fun and start your Do School Different journey. That's club.ruckusmakers.news to get started today. Over 1 million teachers rely on IXL because it's empowering, it helps them make better decisions with reliable data, and it adapts instruction based on student performance. You can get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right, I'm here with my friend Will Parker. This is super exciting for me because we've known each other for ages, and over the years too, we've worked closely together. And you have created a book that I wish I wrote, right?
Oh,
And it's really fantastic to see what you put out there. Not everything stops me in my tracks, but I will say when I saw the cover, and they say don't judge a book by its cover, but the cover's gorgeous, the content's even better, and I just love the title, right? Whose permission are you waiting for?
I
That
can
just
well, thanks, Danny. I'll give credit to Keela Casas, who does the book design for Connected Publishing, and my friend Jimmy, who started that publishing company back in 2020. I was one of the first books he did when I did Pause, Breathe, Flourish.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So when I wrote this book, I reached back to Jimmy, and it was so fun. I got to jump on a call with him and Keela, and she mocked out about 4 different, possibilities, and this one just immediately stood out. So thank you for the kudos.
Yeah, 100%. But the content, like I said, is more important. And let's just start with the title, like whose permission are you waiting for? Like, what's the origin story there? Like, how'd you arrive at the name of the title, and what were you hoping to communicate to the reader?
Yeah. Well, Danny, I just want to say to you, thank you for the opportunity to be on your show, because you are a friend. You're my coach. You've been really, in so many ways, as I've moved into this work full time over the years, you've stayed so connected to the work that I've done. You've encouraged me and inspired me. So thank you for all the ways that you support leaders and have supported my work. And I don't think this will be uncommon to you, because I think you model this, which is when you are considering the thing you really want to accomplish, the improvements that you really want to see, the kind of growth that you really want to experience. Maybe that's right where you are, but it could also be in the trajectory of your career or profession or work. What barriers are you facing and what can you do about those barriers? And there are a lot of barriers, and I don't shy away from what some of those constructs are. But the heart of this book is about how to give yourself permission, because so many times when I'm sitting with leaders who reach out to me for coaching or for
Mm-hmm.
insight or problem solving, we will, hone in that conversation around what is the challenge that they're really facing, what is the outcome that they're really wanting. And not every time, but a lot of times I find myself saying that phrase back to them. Well, then whose permission are you waiting for?
Okay. That's like
Because,
a Will Parker official coaching question. I love it.
because a lot of times the person's permission they're waiting for is their own.
Yeah.
And so I titled it that way because the heart of what I try to get across in this new book is it starts with you, and in recognizing that if there's something you want to see change or something you want to see different, stop looking for permission from whoever that is in your sphere,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's the structure you're in, the budgets you have, the kinds of school you're running, the kind of we have all these things that we sometimes create as what we consider obstacles or constructs of our barriers.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the hardest barrier to overcome is your own.
Mm.
And you've inspired me in those thoughts too, Danny. I have a chapter in here called maximize your influence, and that
Mm.
whole idea of 10x growth. I referenced the book by Dan Sullivan that's so helpful, but you
Yeah.
were helpful in introducing me to some of that content of, okay, how can you think about where you are, but then imagine the possibilities way beyond what you normally would to push yourself to the kind of growth that's possible. What is the old saying? If you aim for the moon, at least if you miss, you hit the stars, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the impetus of this whole book.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. Shoot for the moon, and even if you miss, you'll land with the stars. I love that Will Parker official coaching question. I think a phrase I stole from Rich Litvin that's in the same vein is this idea that we help powerful people remember how powerful they are, right?
Mhm.
And so a lot of times, I see this too in my coaching practice. There are upper limit challenges that the leader is facing, and they're almost always sort of invented by them, right? It's like self-made. And so why sabotage yourself like that? And once you have an awareness, oh, it's all made up. This is made up by me, and I can get rid of it. It really unlocks quite a bit of stuff. So,
Well, I know that's happened to me more than once, but I'm just remembering a story that when I was in college, I was a resident advisor, and as a part of that scholarship, they sent us to a ropes course. And you remember back in the 90s when everybody did ropes courses.
yeah.
And we had this challenge where we were like on this grassy lawn, and they'd put this huge divide between where you are and where we want you to be as an entire group. And
Mhm.
you can't step into the chasm, but you have to somehow get the whole group across. And so, some person had to be launched across, and then you had to build like a human bridge. And this was, I remember this so distinctly because I remember the team coming up with a solution. But as they're coming
Mhm.
up with the solution, I'm hearing myself going, well, I don't think we can do that, or I don't think we're allowed to do this. And
Mm.
and I was the objector to so much of what we were doing to accomplish this goal. And when we were debriefing later, the leader, and I can't remember her name now because that was 40 years ago probably. She said, "Will, I'm just curious, why were you creating rules for this activity that didn't exist?" And I've never forgotten that moment because it was an aha for me to recognize I do that a lot, where I'll create rules or barriers that I imagine exist, but they don't really
Mm.
exist, except in my own mind. And so, my question for anyone listening is, what is that thing that you're really trying to accomplish? Or what is that thing you're hoping toward or working toward, or maybe you dream about doing? And those barriers that you think are keeping you from there, how many of those are imaginary? Or how many of those could be addressed and confronted and overcome maybe more quickly than you realize? And I'm not going to say that that's easy, Danny. I'm not trying to say that. But I do believe it begins first with your mindset.
Yeah, 100%. That's the foundation of everything.
Hmm.
That's why, I often quote the Stranger's Secret book where Earl Nightingale basically says, right? We become what we think about. It's all about mindset at the end of the day. So I think something I want to ask you, your book invites educators to do what they love, but
Mhm.
many school leaders just feel like they're surviving or, compliance, checking off the to-dos.
Yeah.
So how can a ruckus maker, watching or listening to this show really start believing that they have permission to change that?
Yeah. Man, that's such a great question. And you're bringing me back to a conversation that I had back. I'm going to date myself, but back when I was probably 41, 42 years old, and now I'm in my mid 50s, but I was serving as an assistant principal. I was the dad of 4 small kids. I had kind of achieved, though, the goal that I had been shooting for, gotten my master's, landed an
Mhm.
admin job in a school that I liked, doing work that I liked. But I was at a church dinner one night, Danny, and there was a 20-something-year-old in the food line with me, and
Mm,
he was a buddy that I had watched, you know, literally growing up in that church. But now he was married, had started his own business. They just had
mhm.
their first or second child, and he was just catching me up. Hey, we just paid off a huge chunk of our home, and I just started my own business, and
Yeah, yeah.
and I was like celebrating, and I was like, oh, yay! I remember when C and I had all these goals when we were younger, and we reached this goal, and we bought our first house, and I got my master's, and now I'm
Mm.
doing this work as an assistant principal. And he looked at me and he said this question with so much innocence. He was like, "Oh, well, that's great. Well, what are your goals for the next 5 or 10 years?" And I was stumped. And the only thing I could get out of my mouth that was honest was, I'm just trying to survive.
Mm.
And because I was, but when he walked away, Danny, I was haunted by that conversation because I just stopped and thought, when did I stop dreaming? Or when
Dang.
did I stop? And so a few weeks later, and I don't think anything's a coincidence, but this is just how it happened. Our
Mhm.
church did a men's retreat event, and our pastor actually did something I had never had done at a men's event. He brought us all together. We had breakfast, but then he gave us an assignment to go off and just spend time alone in
Mhm.
meditation and in prayer. And he gave us a list of reflection questions to just
Hmm.
work through that day that we were going to bring back that evening and talk about. And I won't share the whole list, but some of them were questions like, what are the milestones you've experienced in this past year? What were the greatest challenges that you've had to wrestle through? What were the greatest successes or achievements that you experienced? What lessons would you say you learned from those experiences? And just that little handful of questions that I just said to you out loud began this process of reflection for me where I began to suddenly see perspective. And it really was the weekend I began to rediscover what it meant to set goals and to think about myself 5 years, 10 years down the road. So to bring it full circle to your question, I would just say for any leader that's out there that you feel like you're just surviving, welcome to the club. But that
Right.
doesn't mean that you have to stop the same reflective cycles that are working in every great classroom, in every great campus, in every successful organization or business. They always involve that cycle of reflection. So Pete
Mm.
Hall, who's a really great education author, once said that,
Yeah.
I heard him once say, and you may have told me the same thing, that experience is not the best teacher.
Hmm.
Reflection on experience is the best teacher. So
Mm.
one of the most practical things you can do is reflect on where you've been, what challenges you've overcome, what successes you've experienced, and what lessons you learned from those, and then look forward and begin to ask yourselves, okay, ask yourself, what are some of the things I want to experience next? And so, because sometimes the clarity is what gives you permission to start taking action.
Right on. Yeah, and some of those questions your pastor had you go meditate on, reflect on in silence, right? Those were some really powerful reflection questions. I'm curious, are there any in the Will Parker coaching tool belt that you also love to use for yourself or with
Mhm.
clients?
Yeah, one of my favorite is, and I mentioned this in the book too, is the cycle of coaching reflections from the book, The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's a business coach, and
Hmm.
what I loved about his book was that it gives you a step by step sequence for kinds of questions to ask in coaching. But if you check out the links that go with each of those chapters, there's a little video of him coaching on his own coaching questions, and so it was a really
Yeah.
great book to read and to watch. But I have become so committed to this cycle of questions that I actually keep a copy sitting right on my desk, Danny. So right here
Yeah,
is my
yeah.
copy stained copy that I keep printed because whenever someone calls me, my tendency is to talk, to start giving advice, but I have to discipline myself to ask questions first. So there's
Mm,
7, and I'll just run through them really quickly. The first is what's on your mind? Just simply asking someone. And by the way, you can do these to yourself too.
mm-hmm,
2, what else is on your mind? Because usually
mm-hmm,
it's the second question that actually leads to what's really on your mind. 3, what's the real challenge here for you?
yeah.
Because if you can define the challenge, then you can start seeing solutions. 4, what do you want? Which is that magic wand question. If you had a magic wand, if you could have the outcome that you
Mm-hmm,
really want, what it look like? 5, how can I help? Which then you start taking that dream and then tying practical steps to it. And maybe I need to research. Maybe I need feedback. Maybe I need coaching. 6, and I love this question because it's the hardest one. If you're going to say yes to this, what are you going to say no to?
yeah,
There's
that's
always an
crucial.
exchange. Yep. And then the last question is what's been the most useful for you in reflecting together? So
Mm,
I've, you are my coach. When I came to
mm,
starting this work full time a couple of years ago, I reached out to you and said, I can't ask people to be coaching with me, Danny, unless I'm putting my money where my mouth is and I'm asking for coaching. But then I also have other friends that do similar work and we trade coaching sometimes where we'll just jump in rooms and reflect with each other.
sure.
And this is the model that I use the most, but there's so many others. You have your own models, and I have friends that use, powerful paraphrasing models or impact question models, but or 5-minute coaching models, but that this is the one I really enjoy using.
Yeah, that work is great. So the book you mentioned, plus the Advice Trap, are two of Michael's, books that ruckus makers should definitely check out. But only after you read Whose Permission Are You Waiting for sure. That last question, well, question 2, I forgot how you phrased it. The way I remember it is there anything else?
Hmm.
And that's such an important question, for a principal, doing a debrief, let's say, with a teacher or whatever, parent coming in hot, because of a student issue. Is there anything else? That's actually when you hear the real issue,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The
It's always
first
that.
thing yeah, yeah, yeah. And most people miss that question because they think what people are leading with, and that's the tip of the iceberg. You're talking about the wrong issue. So is there anything else important? And then that last question, we use it as coaches because it reminds the person we're supporting of the value of our coaching. But the ruckus maker, watching, listening to this, they can use it again with their staff because again, there's value in providing feedback and helping people grow as educators. So what was most, useful or valuable today from our conversation, super crucial to ask
Yeah. Well,
also.
I'll give a shout out to Dr. Gracie Branch, who's a director for the National Association of
Yeah.
Elementary School Principals. She used to be my colleague when I was at the State Association in Oklahoma. She was leading the elementary
Small world.
group, and I led the secondary and middle level groups. But she would end a lot of the trainings that we got to do together by asking the question, let's end by everyone sharing this statement. Today, I'm going to leave thinking about. And it's that same kind of reflection. What was
Hmm.
most useful for you? Today, I'm going to leave thinking about. And what's
Yeah.
really great about that is a final question, is it really helps you see what's that one thing someone's holding on to. Because you can say a lot of stuff in a 60-minute conversation or 15-minute
Yeah.
conversation, but there's usually one thing someone's holding on to, and that's usually the thing that's going to change for them.
Hmm.
And so it's another great reflection piece.
Brilliant. Well, Will, I'm loving this conversation. We're going to pause here just for a second to get a message in from our show sponsors. When we come back, you kind of highlighted that we work together, and so I'd like to dig into that just for a second, and then also into your coaching style as well. ODP Business Solutions, formerly Office Depot Business Solutions Division, has been a trusted partner for schools for 30 years. At ODP Business Solutions, we're by your side to meet your evolving education needs. Let's talk about what keeps ruckus makers up at night. Creating engaging learning spaces while juggling budgets, safety protocols, and those endless supply lists. Here's the game changer. ODP Business Solutions helps you tackle it all. We're not just another vendor, we're your strategic partner in transformation. Want to turn a tired computer lab into a STEAM innovation center? We'll help design it. Need to keep 8 schools stocked and spotless? We've got sustainable solutions that scale. Looking to upgrade from whiteboards to interactive displays? We'll guide you through the entire process. And the best part, you can get it all from a single supplier. That helps you simplify ordering and streamline budgeting while staying compliant with easy access to cooperative contracts. However you want to advance, ODP Business Solutions has 30 years of experience helping districts like yours get ahead. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Most professional development is one size fits all, irrelevant or worse, a gigantic waste of time. And that's why we built the Ruckus Maker Club. Inside, you'll connect with other visionary school leaders just like you. You can do it on your schedule, all inside a private app. We've got tools to build your automatic school, live coaching sessions, and custom GPTs and AI prompts that help you lead smarter, not harder. The club is your ongoing leadership lab for just $100 a month or $1,000 for the year. You can cancel anytime, but you're not going to want to. Join the movement at club.ruckusmakers.news. You can join us today at club.ruckusmakers.news. Teachers love the support that IXL provides in the classroom, and Ruckus Makers love it all as well because IXL also gives school leaders meaningful insights on every level. Put your finger on the pulse of student performance with IXL and its dashboard to drill down to see progress and growth for individual students. You can even customize reports to hone in on the information that matters most to you. IXL helps Ruckus Makers make data-informed decisions that will benefit their students' growth goals. Get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right, and we're back with my friend Will Parker, and we're discussing his book, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? This is Ruckus Maker approved. I would love it if you go out and pick up a copy today. Will hinted that I get the opportunity, the privilege to coach him. And I think we have like a quarterly sort of relationship set up. But of course, we text and call in between those official calls as well. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I just love to hear sort of what you've enjoyed, in our coaching relationship over the years.
Danny, it's funny because before the sponsor break, we were talking about that today I'm going to leave thinking about. And it's so interesting how you and I can cover so much information in one of our coaching calls. And there's usually something I leave thinking about that I'm going to apply and hold on to. So first, I just want to give you some kudos for some things that I've applied that I've learned from you.
Thank you.
One of those has just been the power of connection and relationship. And that sounds so like normal to say, but let me give you the nitty gritty. Because one of the things you said to me 2 years ago when I was first stepping into this work full time is like, well, let me just tell you one of the most productive habits that I have, which is reaching out to the people that I work with or have worked with or that I know in my networks on a normal basis, maybe 10 or 20 in a day, and just saying, how are you doing and how can I help? Or just checking on you. And I remembered that because when I was beginning this work and trying to establish enough client base to do this work full time, I had already some strong commitments before I was able to launch the work, or I wouldn't have done it. But as I was trying to create more relationships or cultivate them, I would think back to Danny's advice. And man, you would think that something that simple wouldn't be that hard. It is a commitment to reach out to people regularly like that. But I have had so many opportunities happen because of that, Danny. And so that's just one Dannyism. Another Dannyism I would give is something that I talk in my book about: beta testing, pathway thinking. And I won't go into details on that right now because that's a whole nother separate conversation, but I want to make an application to something else you've taught me, which is when you're working with someone who needs help or wants a service or is looking for feedback, my tendency was to try to give them exactly what I thought they wanted. And your coaching to me was, how about you give them at least 3 options of what they want? So think about those options in terms of they may want A, but they may also want B, or they may also want C. And so, and you called those good, better, best options. So
Mm-hmm.
here's a really good option of something I hear you saying. Here's something that may even be better, and here's something that would be really potentially the best option for you. And man, that's created all kinds of new opportunities for me too, Danny, because it's given opportunities for me to not just propose something to someone based on what I thought I heard them saying, but also
Mm-hmm.
what I think they may be wanting if they want more, or maybe I'm offering some other things that we didn't have a chance to talk about. But just giving people options then gives them the permission to swing back and say, yeah, I like this, or I like this, or let me take pieces of each of them. But it's I just think that those two pieces alone have just been really valuable takeaways from many of the many, many things that you've said to me. But I mentioned this earlier, the value of coaching and why you need one is, I put that in the book because it's really changed the relationships I have with leaders. But it's also been important for me because everyone needs someone on the other side of them.
Yeah.
And if you think that your own thoughts are going to get you to the place you want, or AI is so popular, or brainstorming with your AI is going to get you to the place you want. Those are those are helpful tools, but there's nothing as powerful as being on the other side of someone who you trust, who can
Mm-hmm.
just reflect back to you, who can listen to you, and from their experience can also speak to you some things that might turn a light bulb on for you that you didn't have before.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, listen, I use AI throughout the day,
Mhm.
all the time, period, right? But the relationship we have, right, and the way we can build and riff and complement each other. Yeah, that I mean, the relational aspect is everything, right? So AI definitely isn't there yet. Yeah, we'll see if it ever does. I don't know. But I want to break down, what you said and make it real and applicable for the ruckus maker enjoying this show because, we're talking about some things that if we're not careful, they might think, oh, they're just talking about business. And that's not the case at all. So the first one had to do with the network and reaching out. And so I
Mhm.
guess I'd like to give my take. And if you have anything to add, please do. So I'm a principal, right? I have a staff and I have no system for reflecting on and tracking who I've talked to about what, how often, et cetera, right? So in business, they have something called a CRM, which is customer relationship management system. And really, principals need a staff relationship management system, right? And essentially, it's just like, how often are you reaching out and connecting with different staff members and checking in on life too, not just the business of school. And that will show that you care, right? And if you don't have that system, here's what happens. I go talk to Will because I like Will, right? And I don't go talk to whoever because that person annoys me, right? But with the system, you could actually, with equity, reach out. You don't have to be best friends with everyone, but you should demonstrate that you care about all your people as a leader. So is there anything you want to add to that part?
No, but I'm going to give a shout out to a former sponsor for my show because I
Mm,
just think this model is so beautiful. But Libra, Matt Wenzel is the guy who began that. It's an it's a company that uses AI to help leaders take their staff, their faculty, whatever system they've got,
mm.
and to systematize how often you're reaching out,
Huh.
giving you prompts on when their birthdays are,
Yeah,
reminders of
yeah.
when something important's happening on the calendar. And so there are tools, whether you can purchase them or create them yourself, but
Hmm.
that can remind you. And I think the other thing I would say, Danny, to that is if you are unsure whether you have a system for consistently reaching out to your stakeholders, the people on your team, the students that you serve, the parents in your community, show me your calendar and I'll tell you whether you have a system.
Yeah,
Because
100%.
because that because your calendar is going to highlight the priorities you've made for when you're actually touching base with people in
Yeah.
those cycles. And if you don't have those things scheduled, they're not going to happen.
I'm gonna get myself in trouble about like felonies if we go into talking about me looking at leader calendars or the absence of one and strangling those leaders I love so much because it's like, yeah, that's what they say. Show me your bank account, show me your calendar. I'll show you what you really prioritize or what you value. All right. I want you to keep riffing and then I'll add on to after you. So we talked about good, better, best. Can you think of an example in school where you might apply that? And if you need time to think, I can go
No, no, no.
first.
I'll just use an example of when you're doing student discipline. I was
Hmm.
an AP for 9 years, Danny. And one of the worst things that you can do when you're trying to empower a student to take ownership over their own behavior is to
Hmm.
dictate for them what the outcome is going to be when they're in trouble. And so I think it's a whole lot more effective if you are meeting with a student to say, all right, this is what's happened. We've worked through the whole situation so we can know what responsibility you own here. And we need to make this right. So here's some options. A, we might consider this disciplinary action that would be a good, reasonable response to that this time of day. B, we might need to set up a meeting and facilitate some apology and restoration in the situation. C, you might want to consider this alternative option because it would be the same amount of time commitment, but something that maybe fits your parent's schedule or your schedule better. Which of these do you think would be the best option for you?
Hmm. Hmm.
Now they have ownership. Now that's
Totally.
just one example. Another example would be, let's say your teachers have communicated to you that they're frustrated with your master schedule. You're not, there's some things that need to be tweaked and changed. Well, instead of just like redoing your master schedule, and I've
Hmm.
done this, pull people together that are interested in redoing that master schedule and ask them to develop an A option, a B option, and a Z option of what
Right.
this could look like if we move forward. And then here's another idea. Let's test it in the spring before we finish the school year so that we can actually tell everybody we're going to test these schedules out to see which of these we like the best before we implement it for the coming year. That's just one example. We did that we beta tested a potential remediation schedule and we had worked it out on paper. We actually ended up with just two options we wanted to test. But then once we tested it, then we were able to tweak and determine, okay, which of these is actually going to be the one that we use. So yeah, there's a lot of ways, Danny, that you could apply that same option in organizational management or student behavior. Feel free to riff any other direction on that too.
Well, the only one I was thinking about is, you sort of take for granted how the hiring process goes, right?
Hmm.
And so you're a teacher and here's what you get. And what I want to challenge ruckus makers to consider is, you got a teacher you really want on campus. And how might like the good offer or maybe the better, like one of the two, is the job. But how might you create a better and best option that potentially scales sort of their impact and influence? Maybe you're able to play around with some compensation or freedom or autonomy, but just dream big around that. Instead of saying, okay, we're going to offer you the job, we'd love to invite you on campus, Will. And we have three ways that you can join us: option A, B, and C, just like your schedules. Which one do you think excites you most, right? And you could actually, through the interview process, kind of figure out a bit of what motivates, drives that person, and then sprinkle that into the potential job opportunity. So that's
Oh
that's
my
what I was
gosh.
thinking.
No, that's so great. And you're reminding me of something. And
Hmm.
so I'll bring it back to another chapter in the book where I talk about pathway thinking. And so, this whole idea of options, Danny, is supported by research. So several years ago, there was a book, maybe 2 years ago now, that two professors at Stanford wrote together called Designing Your Life. And they wrote it because they were design engineering professors working with really high achieving students at Stanford, but having the same conversations that you and I have with peers all the time. What do I want to do now with this degree? Or what do I do
Yeah,
next?
yeah, yeah.
What do I want to be when I grow up? And so these professors are like, man, these are such brilliant students getting these design engineering degrees, and they're still struggling with the next step. So they designed an elective course on how to design your career path or whatever you want to do next. And the thing they decided to do was to design it like they designed their design engineering course.
Hmm.
So they said, let's apply the same thing you do in design engineering to designing pathways for yourself. And guess what they
Right.
introduced? Options: A's, B's, and C's. Most people think binary. They think, well, the choice is
Right
between,
and wrong, black and white. Yep.
yeah. But the truth is it's almost never binary. It's almost
No.
always there's something else you can do
Yeah.
that's a third option or a fourth option. And so give yourself permission to come up with an a B, a C, or even a D, and then explore those pathways until you find the one that has the open door you want, or that seems the most interesting, or maybe you need to do research to figure out more about, or you need to talk to somebody that knows more than you do. But you're right. When I think back to some of the hiring work that I did as a school principal, there were times I came across really talented staff that maybe we couldn't afford. And
Mm,
so then you have to ask yourself the question, just like you said, well, then what could we do to make this worth their time?
mhm,
What kind of autonomy can we build into their day? Or what
mhm.
other responsibilities could we give them that would reward them for this, for saying yes? Or maybe there's a really great teacher that you could build into part of their day, something that would really bring them joy in a way that they haven't done before. We did that one time with a teacher
100%.
that wanted to do more instructional coaching. So we built that into her schedule. And
Yes.
so you can do things that aren't always the cookie cutter approach, that don't
Mhm.
take a union to agree to, I mean, I
Right.
know there's structures out there that do require some of those hoops to be jumped through, but sometimes you can be creative within the constructs that you have to think in pathways instead of binary.
100%. Yeah. I did a program with Seth Godin called the Alt MBA. I was in the 28th cohort of that program.
Wow.
And one of the projects that we did as a group, there were individual group projects. The first group project, project number 2, we had to come up with 99 business ideas, right, in one night and then ship them the next day. And so, yeah, it's certainly not binary. It might not even be three. I'm not saying 99 is the right number. The number wasn't the point. The point was, given constraints of time, because our group was only going to meet for an hour or two, and we actually had to create a business model for each of those 99 ideas. So it wasn't just a list of 99 things you could do. There was a model of how to make it effective to each idea
Mhm.
as well. It was a ton of work, but it showed us, oh, man, half the time we're playing small, right? Or we're quitting too soon. Or, that idea that looks kind of stupid or bad on paper, it's actually kind of a breakthrough if you really think about it. And sometimes I ask, even in staff meetings or my now at this point my team meetings, like, what's the worst way we can do this? What's the worst idea you have? And because sometimes that worst idea is actually really pretty great. Because when you say what's a bad idea or a worse idea, now the team has no guardrails. They have no filter. They can say anything because it could be a bad idea, right? They're not
Mhm.
trying to create a perfect idea. So, yeah.
Well, Danny, this is why you're my coach, because every time I talk to you, I'm like, Danny's taking a course with Seth Godin.
Yeah.
Danny's sitting in
Yeah.
a room with these CEOs teaching him how to do category design. You're always like pushing yourself to that next thing, and so I so admire that, which is why I
Thank
was
you.
like, dude, I want you pushing me.
Hey, it's like an honor and a privilege, that. So, well, this has been an awesome conversation. Well, you've been on the show before, so I'm not going to ask you the usual questions I ask at the end. I'd like to I guess sort of just test some new fun questions for repeat guests. So,
Nice.
let's say you have the ability to text message every school leader on planet Earth in the morning, right? Before they walk into their campus. What's your message to those school leaders going to be?
Well, I'm going to refer to some research that a friend of mine, Mark Schellinger, just sent me last week that's been around for like 40 years, and I didn't even
Hmm.
know it. And it's research on mattering, which is funny because my whole show has been forever principle matters. And
Matters,
obviously at
yeah.
the end of my show, what you do matters. But I didn't realize there's actually a lot of research that shows that when people recognize how much their work matters, their whole perspective on their work changes. So if there was any way for me to get in the head of a leader and to tell him or her as they're stepping into their day, what you're doing today is so extraordinarily important. But when I say that to leaders, I'm going to change your question a little bit, Danny, into two parts.
Sure.
A lot of times I'll say to them, but you have to keep two truths in mind when you're thinking about this. One is going to sound unkind, and that is that you're not as important as you think you are. Because all of us think way more of ourselves than we should. We think this
Yeah.
school would never survive without me. This school would fall apart without me. Well, someday it's going to run without you. You
Yeah.
might even be a picture on a wall that somebody will walk by and they'll have no idea who you were.
If you're not here tomorrow, the school will still run.
That's right. So practice humility. But then the flip side of that statement is kinder, and that is you are way more important than you think you are.
Yeah. It's
Because the
also true.
moment that you're in, you have the opportunity to encourage, inspire, equip someone to maybe do something they would have never believed possible before.
Hmm.
Because that's what's happened to me. And that's what happened to you. That's why when we think back to the educators we loved, they inspired us to believe things about
Yeah.
ourselves we never could have thought otherwise. So if I could get in the head of a leader, those are some thoughts I'd ask them to think about.
Right on. Okay, what's a belief or mindset you've unlearned in your leadership journey, and how did it change things for you?
I think I had to unlearn zero tolerance. And I'll say what I mean by that. There are some rules and expectations that we have for schools and their safety that are super important.
Yeah.
But if we think that zero tolerance can be implemented like consistently across the board without bias, then we've never had it happen to our own child, or we've never had to walk it through with a board member's child, because zero
Mm-hmm.
tolerance always sounds really good until it's your kid
Mm-hmm.
or the kid of somebody that you know there may be another story behind what's ever going on. I was talking about this with Jen Schwanke a couple of weeks ago on my show because she was talking about the first time she had a Boy Scout show up with his knife at school, from his
Yeah.
camp out. What am I
Yeah.
supposed
Yeah.
to do? Zero
Yeah.
tolerance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think as a leader, Danny, it took me a long time to recognize that the frameworks that policy gives us are so important for implementing consistency across school behavior. But if they don't allow you the flexibility to have some kind of, like we talked about before, some kind of pathway options where students can still be held accountable, but in ways that are reasonable for the thing that's right in front of you, then you're creating a situation where you're going to have a lot of regrets
Mm-hmm.
as a leader, and you're going to be implementing policies that sometimes the implementation is harder than the actual infraction itself. So that's not something I learned overnight. It took me years to kind of get to that place where I could figure out how to stay as consistent to policy as I could, while also inviting people into negotiation or to tweaking things or to making sure that we were applying, especially when it comes to school discipline appropriate to the behavior.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we covered a lot of ground, Will, of course. Of everything we discussed, what's the one thing you want a ruckus maker to remember?
I think if I would want to leave any thought with a ruckus maker, I'll just end with this, Danny. One of the things that I think we fool ourselves into believing when we start these conversations about doing what we love is this false assumption that if I could just do fill in the blank, I would feel really satisfied in my work. If I could just,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a truth that growth feels good, or that accomplishing something and being able to do the thing you've trained for feels really good. I'm not saying that's not true. But if you're finding your greatest value or your identity in the accomplishments or in that next thing, you're going to be disappointed. And so there's got to be something deeper where you find satisfaction and value and peace. And I know you and I, because we know each other,
Mm-hmm.
we spend a lot of time thinking about things other than work. And so I just want to invite listeners that the totality of who you are is so much more important than just what you do. So when I invite people to think about, whose permission are you waiting for, I'm not inviting you to this false assumption that the next thing will satisfy you. I don't want to ever leave someone with that idea. I do want to encourage people to take risks and try things and be adventuresome and believe that they can accomplish the great dreams that are in front of them. But if you're not finding peace and satisfaction and joy right where you are today, in the family you've been given, in the faith that you have, in the good work that's right in front of you, it's very likely you're not going to find it somewhere else. So I just think it's important to hold on to that perspective.
Hey, Ruckus Maker, thanks again for pressing play. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. And before you go, if today's show shifted something in your mind or sparked an idea about how you could do school different, then I think you'd be a great fit for what we call the Ruckus Maker Mastermind. The Mastermind's a private community of innovative school leaders who meet weekly to grow, reflect, and disrupt the status quo. You can create the campus experience your staff and students deserve. Applications are now open, and go to betterleadersbetterschools.com/apply to put your application in.